My name is Cassie Strauss, and I'm with the Montana World Affairs Council. Thank you all for being here this morning. And I also want to start by thanking our Council in the Classroom program sponsors, the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation and the Plum Creek Foundation. And also thank all of you for being here. We have 7 classes with us today. We have Powell County, Park, Sealy Lake, Bozeman, Victor, Lodgegrass, and Darby. So while I have you here, I want to put in a quick plug for our upcoming Academic World Quest competition. This year's competition is Tuesday, February 23rd. It's here in Missoula on campus, and we'll be sending emails out on registering teams. You can also visit our website, montanaworldaffairs.org, for more information on that event. We hope to see all of you there. The Council is a nonpartisan voice for global awareness, and we work to bring global education programs to students across the state. Today, we are thrilled to be hosting Imam Feisal Abdul Rauf on his first visit to Montana. Imam Feisal is the chairman of the Cordova Initiative and was named one of Time Magazine's most influential people in the world in 2011. The Imam has devoted his career to healing relations between Muslim Americans and their neighbors while bringing the message of peace to the wider Muslim world. This morning, he's speaking on a history of Muslims in America. And please join me in welcoming Imam Feisal.
Yay.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Do I get to hear them?
So right now everybody is muted, and when we ask them to unmute, just so then we don't hear rustlings of paper.
Okay, wonderful. So I see here 5 classes. Is that the right number?
Yes.
Okay, well, welcome. This is my first time to Montana. It's a large state, and I understand you are all over the state. I see a hand waving there, so I'm waving back at all of you. It's great to be here. It's a bit, it was a little cloudy this morning, although it was very clear and sunny when I landed. So how is it where you are? So I'd like to greet you all. Please introduce yourselves. There may be one person from each of your classrooms to say hi and introduce themselves and perhaps start a question to get us going.
Wonderful. Let's go ahead and start with Lodgegrass. Can you choose one person to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Lodgegrass?
Go ahead, Isaiah.
Oh, hello. This is Lodgegrass. I'm Isaiah Brown.
Hello, Isaiah.
I'm
What is one great thing about Lodgegrass?
Good hunting.
All right, good hunting. Wonderful. Thank you. Let's move on to Bozeman.
We're Bozeman, and the thing that's probably best about Bozeman is the skiing.
That's what's best about it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. How about Livingston? Wait,
we're
give us a way of Livingston.
right here. We're Livingston. We have our world cultures class and our government class, and it's really windy here.
Thank you.
I think they should start a wind farm.
Yes, a win, absolutely. Let's see, how about Sealy Lake? Sealy Lake, will you wave at us? Wonderful. Your turn.
We're Sealy, and Okay. So we're Sealy, and the best thing about Sealy is the sights and the scenery.
Wonderful. It's beautiful in Sealy Lake. And Victor.
So we're Victor. This is our world history?
U.S.
history class. I forgot. So this is our world history, U.S. history class. And the best thing about Victor is it's really pretty if the weather is good. Or bad.
Nice. Maybe I should have flown out there.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And so we'll go ahead and we'll turn it back over.
Thank you very much. Did they have a question they wanted to ask me?
I think we'll save questions maybe for in just a little bit. Oh, and here we have, is that Darby? Hello, Darby. We're just doing really quick introductions. If you would like to just introduce, say, one person from your class and say one great thing about Darby, we would love to hear that.
My name's Wyatt, and probably the best thing about Darby is that we're not Victor.
Oh, they're not Victor. a little class rivalry, I think. All right, I'm gonna turn it back over. Go ahead. Do you want to go ahead and start with your?
Sure.
Great.
Well, it's wonderful to be here with you today and to speak about America and American history and the kind of things which are happening in America. One of the things that I've liked, I've been now in the United States for just about 50 years. I came here in December of 1965. And what impressed me about America since that time was its vitality, its youthfulness, and its emphasis on the youth, coming from older cultures, like my parents are born from Egypt, where there is we know we are perhaps the most ancient, or one of the two most ancient civilizations in the world. We tend to focus on age and seniority, whereas in America, my whole world was turned upside down, and I found America was a country which emphasized its youth, but it also had a youthful vitality. There was both a pro and a con to each of these things. The pro of coming from an ancient society where we tend to respect our elders and try to learn from their wisdom, and there's a sense of a tradition and wisdom passed along. There's a sense in America that everything was meant to be new. You didn't keep things for very long. I was struck by the fact that that pieces of furniture that were 70 years old here would be considered antique, whereas in Egypt, everything is, an antique would be like 1,000 years old or more, and then depending upon how many thousand years, it would fall into different eras of our history. But America is marked by its vitality, its youth, its emphasis on youth, and this is, I think, an important part of why I'm speaking with you here today. So one of the things that I've noticed about America is that America as a country which has welcomed immigrants and defines itself by its immigrant society has been a very rapidly shifting society. The sense of who we are as Americans have always been shifting. From the very beginning, when it was just, the white English speaking, and then the French came, the German came, the people from Northern Europe came. Many of you are products of such diverse genetic pool yourselves. My host here, Bob Saden-Schwartz, I said, that's a very German name. He said, yes, a German name, but I have Irish in my background. So many of you have combinations of different types of ethnic, of cultural backgrounds, but you all came to America and you redefined yourselves as American. And this is what has happened to different societies, different communities who emigrated from Northern Europe, from Italy. There was a time when Italian Americans or German Americans were victims of some degree of marginalization, what's the word I'm looking for? Not being included and considered as a potential fifth column in the country. But as time went on, they became Americanized and became part of what we consider to be American. And the same story is going on today with immigrants from Asia, from different parts of the world, from Latin America, from Mexico, from Japan. And we have become increasingly multi-ethnic. We are embracing different cultures, different foods, and becoming and enriching what it means to be America. So this is where we are in terms of our story. The Muslim immigrants or immigrants from Asia, some of whom are Muslims, some of whom are Buddhists or Hindus, are now acclimatizing and adding to the American fabric. So you'll see, for example, I just saw a place called Pita Pit here today, which is like Middle Eastern food, Arabic food, where they sell pita bread. I saw an India grill, so now it's Indian restaurants. Now, 30, 40, 50 years ago, when I first came to this country, the Americans didn't know these foods. They didn't even know, sushi. Today, sushi is common all over America. I was on an American Airlines flight, and one hostess was shouting at the other, "Any more hummus? This is food from the Arab world." So today, the foods from all over the world have become part of America, and we think of it as American. The same thing has happened previously. Many of you may not know that macaroni and cheese, which you think as being a very American food, or pizza as being a very American food, was actually brought here by Italians, and it became part of American food. So this story of America welcoming people from all over the world, embracing it, and making it part of its culture is something which is very, very special about America. It is unique about America, and this is what enables America to relate to the rest of the world, because those communities who immigrated here became very often the bridge between America and the countries where they originated from. So just like America had a very special relationship with England, with France, later on with Germany, with Northern Europe, with the Europeans, it will also increasingly have such good relationships with people, with those countries, to an important degree because of the communities from those countries who immigrated to America, became part of America, and love both this country and their countries of origin. So that's the story, and I want to open up to questions and get your thoughts about this. Many of you, when I speak about this, it will remind you of your own ancestry, perhaps, and your own culture, and maybe your own very ethnic makeup in a number of instances. But this is what we're here to discuss. So let's hear it from you guys.
I would also like to say that as we're thinking about this, I want you to think about where your ancestors came from and what your origins are. And maybe if, along with any questions that you have, if maybe we could have some representatives from each school sort of share that so we get a feel for what we have today in the classroom. I think that would be a fantastic way to start this off. Can we start with Bozeman, please?
Was the other guy who's get on there?
Where do you think Indians came from?
So they're asking you, where do you think the Indians came from?
You mean the native Indians or the Indians from South Asia, from India?
Native Indians.
Oh, native Indians were native to this country, no doubt. And the story of how they were treated or maltreated is certainly a blot on American history in terms of our emphasis on the equality of all human beings and the treatment of all human beings and the granting of universal rights. I think one of the, to me, one of not only the unpleasant chapters of American history is our treatment of the native Indians, and it is my hope and prayer that moving forward we can not only help them but also learn from them, because much of their culture is a very beautiful culture. Their understanding of nature, their relationship to the meaning of nature. I mean, when we talk now about taking care of the air and the environment, they really understood what it meant to be at one with the environment, and to that we were in fact stewards of it, and that we all owned the environment, equally. The name Indian, as you know, did not originate from their own history. It's because those who came from Europe, who so-called discovered America, they were looking for a route to India in South Asia. And they thought when they landed here that they had landed in India, and therefore they called them Indians, but this is actually a misnomer. They're really Native Americans.
Lodge grads, would you mind sharing a little bit of your cultural heritage, just a few minutes?
Well, I think we have many similarities with what you were talking about the how everything's more traditional and how you respect your elders. That's how we do.
This is the Crow tribe, and one of the hardest problems, though, is keeping some of the traditions alive and the language alive, especially the language, because we live in an English-speaking society, but we still have to try and keep the language alive in school. There's only about 17,000 members of the Crow tribe.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, maintaining your culture, your language, your history, your values are very, very important. I remember reading the opening of was it Black Elk? It was one of the most powerful passages I've ever read, and much of what I've learned. I mean, we have a lot to learn from the Native Indians, and I think that the Native Americans, and the Native Americans have the highest aspects of their culture is something which really, really ought to be preserved, ought to be taught, ought to be advanced, because they are no doubt a part of our heritage, and they're much needed in society today. Because the Native Americans respected the environment, they respected the balance of nature, they respected the notion that all beings, not only human beings, even the animals had rights. They had rights to their homes. They had rights to their spaces. So the attitude that we have had of completely demolishing forests and polluting the rivers, in addition to destroying the environment that we depend upon, also in fact destroys the homes for many of these animals, varieties of foliage and trees. And the Native Americans had this sense that just like in a condominium or a co-op arrangement, where yes, you may have your own apartment, like your own teepee, but the rest of the grounds were owned in common. So the air, the water, the land in general, the rights to fish, the rights to hunt, these were not something that were owned by any individual, but they were owned in common by everybody. So all human beings had the right to fish for food, to hunt for food. But not only human beings, even the animals themselves had a right to hunt for food. So if there was a lion or he had and she had, they have also rights. And this concept of a shared, not only a shared ownership, but a shared living. This concept of a shared living and ensuring that everybody had the minimum that they need to be able to not only survive but to thrive is a concept, I think, that no one had practiced in a way that was more perfected than the Native Americans. And that particular lesson, I think, is something that certainly, if America can learn and the rest of the world can learn, is one of those important things that need to be done.
I would love to move on a little bit more to Muslim relations with Americans, if we can, and then also we can continue this part of the conversation in just a little bit with some more questions. Also, if there are other questions that we don't get to today and students want to write those down, I'll be happy to pass those along to you.
Okay.
If that's okay with you. So would you mind sharing a little bit about Muslim-American relationships with the students?
Could you detail that a little bit more? By Muslim American, you mean like between America and the rest of the world, or Muslims within the United States?
Well, I'll leave that up to you.
Can we ask a question about that?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Bozeman.
We did a survey. This is our government class, and we're doing multiple perspectives. And we did a survey yesterday. On the experiences that our students have had with people of the Muslim faith or people from the Middle East, which I don't know that we entirely understand within our community, even that's necessarily a difference, that there might be people in the Middle East who are not Muslim. And so for a group of students who have, in their experience, I would say a very limited exposure other than what they see on the media, could you maybe talk about the difference between what is presented in the media as kind of a representation of both Muslim Americans and Muslims abroad, as opposed to the reality of how you view the reality of what it really is?
Great question. Well, the Middle East is although it's a region of the world, it really encompasses many countries with different cultures. So if you're talking about Egypt, Egypt has its own history, its own culture. Although a lot of it's like saying Latin America or Central and Latin America predominantly speaks Spanish and predominantly are Catholic in the faith. But Mexico is very different from Honduras, very different from, Haiti, from Santo Domingo, from Colombia, from Argentina. Each of these countries has a particular culture and a particular history. This even applies to the Middle East to an even greater degree, because many of these countries at one time had their own unique culture. So countries like Egypt, as I said, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, the Arabian Peninsula, etc., are even today regarded as, although they speak one language with different regional accents, they are culturally very different. And until, let's say, a century ago, until, say, World War I, the end of World War I, these countries had regional traits and characteristics, and they were, by and large, except for the empty spaces of the Arabian Peninsula, were very multicultural. They had people of different faith traditions. We've had Christians from beginning of Christianity in almost all those countries. We've had Jews from the very earliest times of Judaism, because the Middle East is the cradle of where not only Islam started, but that's where Jesus Christ was born and lived. That's where Abraham was born and lived. That's where Moses was born. Is born in Egypt and lived in that region. So this area is the cradle and the birthplace of all of these religions. But what has happened in religious history is that the centers of gravity of a number of those religions, especially Christianity, shifted. So although Christianity was born in what is today Palestine, as Christians moved to different parts of the world and spread Christianity, different churches were born that had a uniquely country-wide character. So you have the Egyptian church, you have the Syrian Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church. And when Rome finally, although they oppressed the Christians and threw them to the lions, as you have seen in many of the films, when Rome finally accepted Christianity, they became the Roman Catholic Church. And Rome became the capital of the Roman Catholic brand of Christianity. So they no longer looked to Jerusalem or to Palestine, although they know it was historically the birthplace. The development of Christianity and Catholic thought, or the Roman Catholic brand of Christian thought, really developed in Rome. So today, from then on, today Catholics all over the world, there's probably 1 billion Catholics around the world, they don't regard Jerusalem as their capital, they regard Rome as their capital. And the same thing has happened to other forms of Christianity. As Christianity spread, you have the German Lutheran Church, the Swedish Lutheran Church, and when England became Christian, they rebelled against the Pope and they created the Anglican Church, which is the English Church. And the same thing has happened in America. So Christians in America do not regard Christianity as a Palestinian religion or anything like that, but as primarily as an American religion. And that's true of most religions. But in spite of that, Christians have continued to exist in Egypt, in Syria, in Palestine, in Iraq, in almost every region of the Middle East. There have been Christians. Unfortunately, what has happened lately, in the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years, partly as a result of the authoritarian regimes in that region, a lot of people sought to emigrate because they couldn't live well in that part of the world. It's like Mexicans who, let's say, are trying to come north of the border in order to make a better living for their families. So a lot of people from the Middle East couldn't make a good living there. Underemployment, economy is bad, authoritarian regimes. Whoever could flee tried to flee or tried to migrate away from those countries. So a larger percentage of the Christian populations in the Middle East were successful in migrating to Europe and to America, and that has contributed to the reduction of the native Christian populations in those countries. In addition, there has been the rise of a more extremist form of Islam, particularly in the, is that me or is that you?
That's you.
Oh boy, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
A more extremist kind of interpretation of Islam has spread over the last 20, 30, 40 years in much of the region, who have tried to oppose anybody who, even within the faith, has a different interpretation about something. And this is something which also tends to happen with authoritarian regimes. You're familiar with this in studying European history. When you have authoritarian regimes who do not allow political freedoms, they tend to co-opt the religious institutions, take one particular interpretation, make that the religion of the state, so to speak, and anybody who does not agree with that particular interpretation becomes, burnt at the stake, proverbially or literally, or literally chased out of town. This is why the Pilgrim Fathers fled England and came here and founded America as a country which is based upon religious freedom.
Wonderful. I want to make sure our other schools get an opportunity to ask some questions as well. We've heard from Bozeman and Lodgegrass. Celie, do you have any questions?
So, why did you want to build a mosque on Ground Zero? I
didn't want to build a mosque on Ground Zero. I've been imam of a mosque which is about 8-10 blocks from the World Trade Center since 1983. That is my area. And we outgrew the space. We looked for another building that would be suitable for us to have a larger space. And we found this building was about a couple of blocks away from Ground Zero. You have to realize Manhattan is not Montana. Spaces, in a space which can fit into maybe part of Missoula, we have 12 million people living there. And during the day, I think we have an extra 5 million who come in from outside, who commute just to work in Manhattan. Manhattan is really a very small, tiny space, and it's very vertical, and everything is just a few blocks from each other. But this is not in Ground Zero. This happened to be my area, the area that I have a community in. We have a growing community of Muslims who live in and work in that area. So the nomer of a Ground Zero mosque was actually a misnomer. It was a deliberate attempt by those who are hostile to us to create hostility. So they called it the Ground Zero Mosque in order to arouse hostility against us. And that became a cause célèbre. It was the midterm elections in 2010, and it was used by many members of the Republican Party, not only because of an issue in itself, but really to attack the Obama administration because his father was a Muslim, and they wanted to use this to promote their political advantage. Unfortunately, what happened was the thing very rapidly got out of hand, and it caused great alarm in many, many Muslim capitals around the world. And, we have many interests in many countries, Iraq, Afghanistan, so forth, Saudi Arabia, that are Muslim. And this story very quickly, about within 6 weeks, both parties realized had to put it down, and the whole issue died down.
Thank you, Celie Lake. But let's go ahead and move to Darby.
So we read the Missoula article yesterday to prepare for this, and you made some comments about the U.S. foreign policy, and I was wondering if you could give some specific ideas of how the U.S. could better its foreign policy.
Lots of examples. One of the most recent ones being, let's say, our treatment in Egypt. When things were enveloping in Egypt, which we tried to relate to both sides, but we related in a way that both sides became angry with America. And I'm convinced that America could have done a better job in intervening in a way that would have created a better outcome, not only in Egypt for the Egyptians, but.
Livingston, would you mind muting your microphone?
Thank you. Okay. Can I continue?
Yes, go ahead and continue.
Yeah. So regarding Egypt, one of the things that has pained many people, not only people in the Middle East, but people even within America who really are informed, is that our policies have not been very coherent. They have been short-term. They have been short-sighted in many cases, and they have not inured to our better benefit. I mean, our decisions to invade Iraq, our decisions to invade Afghanistan have resulted in a lot of money being spent, a lot of money being wasted, which would have been better spent in America or spent more wisely. We have also projected ourselves to that part of the world in a way that has not won the universal respect of people. Even our friends and our allies, for example, are not happy with the way we have projected our policy. And all this is because of the way we have engaged or not engaged. At the moment, for example, Saudi Arabia, which has been a dear ally of the United States for a long time, is not happy with the United States because of our nuclear agreement with Iran. Now, all of these things need not happen that way. You do not need to have that kind of an outcome. If we engaged more wisely, more strategically, more coherently, we could have a much better impact and have a much better outcome, have better relationships. The bottom line is, all of the people in that part of the world, not only at the grassroots level, but even at the government level, the vast majority rather, I shouldn't say everyone because that never happens anywhere in the world, but the vast majority of both people in government and in the population want to have a good relationship with America. But in order to have a good relationship, you need, look, relationships are relationships. It's like boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. I mean, all of you know how important that is. You all want to have good relationships. But you also know how challenging that can be to have a successful relationship between a guy and a gal, or even in a marriage relationship, or a parent-child relationship. There are many times when you want things to be done better. You know things could be done better. It's precisely analogous to that. And in that respect, there's no doubt in my mind and many other people's minds that our policies could be conducted in a far more coherent manner that would inure to our success and to better success in the region.
Thank you. And I have that question from Livingston before we got cut off. What they were trying to ask is, do you think there will ever be a time in the world when people don't persecute each other because of religion?
I believe the answer is yes. And the reason why I believe that is because if you go back in our own history, Islam has been around for 1400 years. There are many times in our history, in Baghdad, in Cordoba, in Spain, where Muslims ruled over Christians, over Jews. There was great harmony, there was great prosperity, there was great interchange of ideas in Ottoman Turkey until recently, in India until, between Hindus and Muslims. So we have had proof from our own history that harmonious relationships between faiths can exist because it did. The other indicator, the other evidence that I can quote is if you look at European history was fraught with prejudice against a religion, religious wars. Many of the wars that were waged in Europe were waged between Protestants and Catholics, or between, or between Catholics and Orthodox Christians. And until very recently in Ireland, between Catholics and Protestants, both Irish. But Europe succeeded in growing away from that. Europe succeeded in creating a sense of good relationships between all of the religious faith traditions. So the proof is in our history, both European history and in Islamic history, and all we have to do is to bring back those circumstances that create such harmony.
Thank you. Now, I believe we have heard from every school, just as a confirmation. Oh, I see we have a question. Oh, I'm so sorry over there. Yes. I see you. Is that Victor? Victor, go ahead.
Aslam wa alaikum. Hello.
Sorry? Can you bring the microphone closer to your mouth so I can...
Closer to you. Yeah. Okay.
Because we're far from the microphone, I can't make it sounds more...
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, nice to meet you. I got a question. That's kind of a statement. All right, so I have a question, and do you think this is more of a problem that's going political, or do you think it's more on the fact that everybody has their own different religions, and that is mostly causing all the problems because everybody has their own beliefs and how things could run? And do you think that if we could get a community or a committee that could just focus on the main problems that we're having, do you think that could be solved quicker and more efficiently? Thank you.
Good question. I think that that belief is very rarely the cause of problem. People don't attack others because of a difference of belief, as a rule. Most conflicts, all conflicts happens really when two parties are fighting for one thing which both want. All right, so, and usually the fight happens because of issues of power or issues of something which has economic value, like land, water rights, etc., which both sides want. So let's say if you look at most of the conflicts which exist today and have existed in the past, they really were about issues of power or economics. So even, let's say, the problems which the original founders of this country, they basically deprived the Native Americans of their land, taking their land away. And that's the reason why the conflict happened. It wasn't because of issues of belief. But what happens is that if you deny a people, if you deny a group of people, however they are defined, from their rights to power, to their share of power, to their share of land, to their share of economic well-being, then you create conflict. So let's say, conflicts can exist on any basis, and you can separate it based upon religious difference, upon gender difference, upon skin coloring difference, upon cultural difference, upon tribal difference. And if you say, okay, all women will not be given jobs or will be paid a fraction of men, you're going to create a gender conflict. If you say that all people who are of a darker skin coloring will not get the same kind of jobs or not be admitted into the hallways of power except those who are lighter skin coloring, you're going to have a conflict based upon skin coloring. If you say that we're going to have people of this tribe be given power and those of the other tribe not given power, you'll have a tribal conflict. And this is how conflicts begin. And after a year, 10 years, 20 years, a generation, two, people think that the that actually religion is the source of the problem, or they think that, oh, you know, women think differently from men, so that's the reason why we have problems. Because men are from Mars and women are from Venus, they're from different planets entirely, and that's why we have gender conflict. No. Conflicts are really because of not granting people of different gender, skin coloring, culture, whatever it is, parity on the issues which are important to people. So the way you solve a conflict is to make sure you give them parity. Make sure women have the opportunity to get the same jobs as men. Make sure they get paid equally for doing the same jobs as men, and you will very rapidly eliminate the gender problem or gender gap. If you grant people of, people who are of a darker skin coloring, same opportunities to jobs, same opportunities to become members of Congress and to run for political office, as long as they have the chance to share in power and to share in economic well-being, that's how you eliminate the ethnic or skin coloring conflict. And it goes along the line in everything. If you go to any part of the world and see a conflict between two groups of people, be it based upon religious differentiation, sectarian difference, it always has to do with a lack of parity that one group feels in matters of power and matters of economic opportunity. So that's how you solve it.
Okay, I see that Bozeman has a ton of questions, so I'm going to turn it over to Bozeman.
So do you think the conflict between the Islamic...
Can you get closer to the mic? I can't make out your words.
So do you think the conflict between the Jews and the Islamic people, do you think it's a lost conflict?
In Israel and Palestine, David was asking about.
Israel and Palestine, is that like a lost conflict? Because I don't even know what they're fighting over right now.
They're fighting over land. Because what has happened is that the Palestinians, have had their land confiscated and continue to be confiscated by the Israelis. And that's the reason why. If you give parity if Israel were to give parity to the Palestinians and to give them their land, or create a system where, in this day and age where we can build multiple levels and condominiumize the country. So, okay, your land is worth $100,000. I'll pay you market value for your land. Build, 10 or 20 stories. Give you one floor for you to live on as well, so you have made money, and allow other people. You will solve the conflict that way.
All right, and I know that you guys are just about leaving. We are almost out of time. We have about 2 minutes remaining, and I know that you guys are all have to get to your next class. So I want to just take a few minutes and say thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. And I want to remind classes that if you have additional questions, we have one last question. I see. Who is that? My goodness, is that Sealy Lake? Sealy Lake, do you guys want to ask the very last question?
Thank you.
And also, if you have additional class questions, please feel free to email me and I will pass those on.
Okay, so my question is, Islamic America, at least in Montana, is an extremely small minority, and it's often overlooked. So how would the communities integrate into society that, because of 9/11, they refuse to have anything to do with them?
Great question. I think this, again, the answer to that question lies in our own history here in America. Because as different religious communities immigrated to America and different cultural communities came to America, they encountered a lot of prejudice. The Catholics, for example, encountered a lot of prejudice when they came to America over 100 years, 150 years, pretty much until World War II. The same thing with the Jewish immigrants who came to America. They encountered a lot of prejudice. But two things happened that reduced the prejudice. One of them is that those communities themselves evolved from being Italian Americans speaking Italian, living in ghettos like Little Italy in New York, or Germantown in New York, or Chinatown, which still exists in New York. They became Americanized, and the faith themselves, you had Italian Catholic churches, German Catholic churches, Polish Catholic churches, Irish Catholic churches, but after 1, 2, 3 generations, they become American Catholic churches. So what has happened is that an American Catholic identity emerged in terms of their relationship to the hallways of power, in terms of their culture, in terms of their laws, and so forth. And also, because food is something which nobody minds eating, people began to appreciate Italian food and German Sachertorts. I mean, some of the greatest pastries are German pastries, or Italian food, or East European food. It became part of the American palate. So all of these aspects helped bridge the divide. And that's why in my last book, Moving the Mountain, I've also spoken about the need for American Muslims to evolve their identities from being immigrant identities to being American. So as we Americanize our laws, our culture, our art, our architecture, and Americans enjoy our foods, our hummus, our pita, our falafel. That is how, within a generation or two, we will become increasingly embraced as Americans, recognize them as Americans, and be accepted and part of a healthy and vibrant and harmonious America.
I want to thank you very much, and I appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Please take a minute to just thank Imam Feisal with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you, guys.